Let's see. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome. Give me 1 second while I hit that go live button over on Instagram. All right. And we are live on Instagram as well. All right, guys. Happy Thursday. Weeks are just flying by, aren't they? Barbara, can you believe it?
No, 2024 is whizzing by.
It's gone, right? It's
Yep.
gone. I'm already seeing, well, for sure Halloween, but honestly, I'm starting to see like Christmas stuff.
Oh, I
Which is
saw that like a month or two ago in like Costco. It was
yeah, in Costco. That's exactly what I was thinking too. I don't go there very, very often, but I was like, whoa, you guys are
wait,
on it.
yeah.
All right, guys, welcome. And I'm really happy to be here with you today. Again, happy Thursday. Welcome to Live with Leslie. And I am Leslie Vitel, business strategist and mentor specifically for functional nutrition and medicine professionals. And I'm really delighted to have you here with me today. So we have a great topic in store for you today. And it is a topic that I get asked about all the time. And that is, the legal ramifications of running a private practice, right? The risks, all that kind of thing. And it's really interesting because of course, I'm not an attorney. So I brought one on for you today. And Barbara is awesome. We've done a little collaboration in the past, and I think you're really going to enjoy today's conversation. So specifically, we're going to hone in on the legal risks in the wellness industry and how to navigate them, again, from a legal perspective. Because it's challenging, right? And it can be scary. So today, I'm excited to chat with Barbara Zabawa from the
Yep.
Center for for Health and Wellness Law LLC to learn the legal considerations every health professional should know to protect their practice. So here's a few of the things that we're going to delve into. Why it's crucial to consult with a lawyer when working in the wellness industry, the differences between wellness and traditional healthcare, and why the distinction matters, the biggest legal risks involved in wellness practices and how to mitigate them effectively, and of course, much more. So, welcome, Barbara. I'm delighted to see you again and really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for bringing this subject up to the people who know you and love you. And my mission is to get that legal aspect of wellness discussed more because I don't think it's discussed nearly enough. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, really appreciate your time today, too. All right. So, as we get things started, let's see here. Actually, I thought I was live on Instagram. Now we are live on Insta. All right, they make it a little complicated to navigate. So, welcome if you're joining us from Instagram. So, what I wanted to do to kick off our conversation, Barbara, is have you give us a little bit of the lay of the land in terms of your background. I believe you have an MPH as well. So, I'm really, really curious about, the evolution of your career. When did you get the MPH? Well, were you a lawyer first and then went back and got the MPH? And just kind of give us your backstory.
Oh, well, that's refreshing. Yeah, I don't get to do that very often. But yeah, I knew I was interested in healthcare back in undergrad. Even though I was an English major, I knew that I wanted to work in the healthcare industry in some capacity. I just didn't know what. I toyed with dentistry and medicine and nursing, and I couldn't decide. And I ended up getting a fellowship right out of undergrad to do basically workplace wellness research abroad in Europe for a year. And so I did that and kind of fell in love with the whole idea of prevention. And so I went to the University of Michigan School of Public Health upon my return from Europe and got my MPH in health administration and policy. And it was there at U of M that one of my mentors convinced me to go to law school. So after my MPH, I went to law school knowing that I wanted to do something in healthcare, law. So that's kind of how I got into healthcare law. Wellness law wasn't even a thing, and I'm trying to make it a thing. But so after I graduated from law school, I worked as a healthcare lawyer. I clerked for a judge. I did public interest work, and then worked in some law firms. Made it all the way up to partner. Chaired, their health law team. Went in house briefly at an health insurance company, and did HIPAA privacy and Affordable Care Act compliance stuff. And then in 2014, decided to open up my own law firm, which is the Center for Health and Wellness Law, and kind of went full circle in my career. Went back to wellness, which is where I started with that fellowship abroad back at, after I graduated from undergrad. So I decided, there's an unmet, when I was practicing healthcare law, representing physicians and hospitals and insurance companies, I recognized this whole void of legal help for people who were on the fringes of the healthcare system, the traditional healthcare system. And so that when I struck out on my own, I knew that's the kind of that was the population I wanted to help. I wanted to go back to my roots of wellness and really be the legal resource for wellness and workplace wellness, in particular initially. And I wrote a book, Rule the Rules of Workplace Wellness Programs, and went to conferences and just started speaking to all kinds of wellness related groups on the law part of wellness, because surprisingly, I guess, unlike going to big healthcare conferences, that are attended by health systems or insurance companies or medical clinics, these wellness industry conferences, I was the only lawyer. And that was such a contrast to the healthcare world, where those conferences are crawling with lawyers because, the health law is a much older, recognized legal practice area, and the legal community hasn't really caught on yet to this idea that the wellness industry also needs some legal guidance. And I hear that from clients of mine. The reason why they even try to find me and contact me is because they are nervous. There aren't really any rules or guideposts for them to know what is going to keep me out of trouble and what's going to get me into trouble. And so, I am trying to be that resources, and also trying to convince other lawyers through my work as an academic that, the wellness industry needs some attention from the legal industry. So in addition to having my own law firm, the Center for Health and Wellness Law, I teach at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Law School, health law, and a course I created called Legal Rights in Health and Wellness. And then I will be teaching contract law in the spring. So, and as part of my job as a professor of law, is I have to research and write in my interest area, which is, of course, wellness. So over the last year, I've written 4 law review articles, and I'm hoping to talk about some of those today, because those are top of mind, and I think they provide some really valuable insight into how to differentiate between healthcare and wellness, because that ultimately, when people come to me as a lawyer or a legal consultant in the space, the crux of their legal concern is what I'm doing healthcare, medicine, or wellness, and what are the repercussions or the consequences of doing any of those, based on my credentials, based on my situation, based on people that I'm trying to help. And so that really is the essence of most of the consults that I have to deal with. And so I never really sat down until this past summer to really articulate the difference between practicing medicine or healthcare, uh, and and wellness. So I did the hard work over the summer, which culminated in a 25,000 word law review article that is going to be published by the Hofstra Law Review early next year. And yeah, I'm hoping to summarize some of those things for you today, but I'll pause for a moment.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so you're a busy lady, and I know you have a podcast as well.
Mhm.
So we'll be talking about that a little bit
Two
later.
podcasts.
Two podcasts.
Yeah.
Amazing. So why don't we start with talking about the distinction between healthcare, health law, and wellness law? And why does that matter to our audience?
Yeah. The distinction, I arrived at the distinction between health law and wellness law by looking at how the law currently distinguishes between health care or medical care and wellness. And there are several bodies of law that already create that distinction. And the primary one is the Internal Revenue Code, the tax code. And the others are the Food and Drug Administration. Um, Medicare has some distinctions that it draws from, and then there are some lawsuits where there's some light that's further shed in the difference. But I would say the foundational body of law that I used for my article was really the tax code. And so those of you who are listening might know, if you have a medical expense under the tax code, you can deduct those expenses, or they're reimbursable by your FSA or an HSA, or they're covered by insurance. So medical expenses get special treatment under the tax code. You can deduct those expenses or get reimbursement or subsidization somehow. Wellness expenses, on the other hand, are not subject to special treatment. If you spend money on wellness products or services, you won't get to deduct those expenses from your taxes in most cases. And so if you look at the definition of medical care under the tax code, it's under section 213D of the Internal Revenue Code, that definition really sheds light on, okay, well, what is healthcare? What is medical care, to the extent that we can deduct it from our taxes? And so many other bodies of law use that definition in the Internal Revenue Code to, for their purposes, in defining what medical care is, like group health plans and under ERISA use, that same kind of definition. So the definition in sum is expenses related to the diagnosis, treatment, cure, mitigation, or prevention of disease or illness, or to fix an injury or address a structure or function of the body. In essence, that's what the definition under the tax code of medical care is. And so if you have expenses that are for the purposes of diagnosing, treating, curing, mitigating, or preventing disease or illness or an injury, then your insurance will probably cover it. You'll be able to use your FSA and HSA dollars. And to the extent you don't have insurance coverage, you'll be able to deduct those expenses from your taxes, assuming you meet the threshold and, whatever. And then in further guidance by the IRS in publication 502 that they put out every year on deducting medical expenses, they go into a little bit more detail about what are some examples of medical expenses and what are some examples that may look like medical expenses, but really are not medical expenses. And we'll consider those wellness expenses. So money that you spend for joining a gym, money that you might spend for enrolling in a diet or weight loss program, money you might spend on like spa treatments, all these things fitness, diet, de-stressing, a lot of things that, the wellness industry tries to address. They may make you feel better. They may enhance your well-being, but they're not being prescribed by a licensed medical provider. They're not necessarily treating or curing a disease, illness, or injury. And because of that, they're not deductible on your taxes. And they're not covered by insurance either. And so for me, looking at that distinction between medical care and wellness, one is the medical care is addressing disease, illness, injury, and wellness is not. Wellness is trying to improve your well-being, but it's not fixing you. It's not fixing a problem. That distinction led me to the place of distinguishing health law and wellness law as health law. The laws that govern medical care and health care are really coming from a place of vulnerability, addressing a patient's vulnerability. A person enters a medical venue or encounters a medical professional coming from a place of vulnerability under either a current disease, illness, or injury, or an imminent threat of one. And they are looking to that professional to fix them, to get them to a place of equilibrium, a status quo. So while they're sick or injured, they can't fully function. And the tax code recognizes that. The tax code is meant to make sure that people can fully function to be productive members of society. And so to the extent you are unable to do that, we want to get you to back to a place, or as close to the place where you can and become a productive member of society again. Whereas in wellness, the law, because it doesn't view you as vulnerable, it's not addressing a disease, illness, or injury. It views you as coming from a place of empowerment, where you are not happy with your status quo. I mean, you can function, but you would like to optimize who you are on the six dimensions of wellness: spiritually, intellectually, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, or all of them. And so you seek products and services from people who can help get you from the status quo to some higher level of functioning, optimal level of functioning. And that's great, but it's not necessary for you to be a productive member of society, at least from the legal standpoint. And so there's less protections for you because you're not vulnerable, and you're not battling some illness or injury. So you can think a little bit more clearly. Presumably you have a little bit more capacity to judge whether something is going to optimize your well-being or not. And so standard consumer law protections, like making sure you're not being misled, that the person who you're seeking services from is not misrepresenting who they are, or telling you lies, and making sure that they're not trying to swindle you out of money. Those protections exist, but there's no fiduciary obligation like there is with a healthcare professional. And so that's kind of where I landed, and what relevance this has to people who might be listening in the wellness space, if they're a coach or some other kind of wellness professional, is if you are trying to address disease or illness through your wellness practice. So if you have people coming to you who are looking for you to fix a disease or injury or illness, it's not really wellness in my estimation. That's healthcare. And so if you're not if you don't have the appropriate license to do that kind of work, you shouldn't be doing it. What you in wellness should be doing is looking at those individuals who are already fine, but they want to be better. And that's your job, is to help them get better.
So I have a question of just to really try to make a distinction. So many of the people watching today are licensed professionals. So like registered dietitians who have a license to practice would, and some of them specialize in weight management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them specialize in renal, right? Working with patients that have, renal insufficiency, that kind of thing. So is that wellness or is that healthcare?
I would say that's healthcare.
Okay.
And dietitians are,
it's healthcare.
Yeah, right. The IRS would view that as healthcare. And so that would fall within the legal regulatory framework for healthcare, which, the dietitian has to follow the rules on their scope of practice as it's outlined in their state's licensing statute or certification board. If they have one, they have to meet certain credentials, and, they're held to a fiduciary standard. So if they screw up, they could be sued for malpractice. Their liability insurance is going to be different than it would be for just someone who is a coach, for example.
And why does this distinction matter to the practitioner or to the coach?
It matters because if I've seen so many wellness professionals, coaches, who target sort of their audience is people with certain conditions, certain illnesses, diabetes or Lyme's disease or autism. I've seen so many individuals that this is my target audience, and these are the people I want to help. And I think that opens up, some risk. I'm not saying it's impossible to navigate, but your role is not to fix people's diabetes. People with diabetes who are living with chronic diabetes, presumably they have healthcare practitioners, licensed healthcare practitioners that they're working with. And maybe, they're just trying to improve another aspect of their life. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they can seek your services as a coach to do that. But if you really want to treat diabetes, if that's your goal as a wellness professional, it's like, I'm going to eliminate your diabetes, well, then you're not really acting anymore as a health coach, or unless you're working under the supervision of a physician or some other licensed professional who does have that responsibility. You're acting like a healthcare provider. And in that case, I would say go get credentialed to be a dietitian or, some other licensed professional, because, otherwise it's just a way to try to work around the regulatory infrastructure we have in place, which I'm not a fan of. I'm not promoting it, but it's what we have. And as a lawyer, I can't tell you, go break the law. So, reframing what your role is, I think, is so important. And that's the relevance that I think this article brings to the industry.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So if someone is a coach, like a wellness or health coach, my big takeaway, since I'm all about, helping people market, is that they probably shouldn't be like honing in on a specific disease related niche, right? Like I specialize in IBS or helping, people that are struggling with IBS, since that is a disease entity.
I think that creates some risk unnecessarily. Okay. And, but again, if you're working alongside as part of a multidisciplinary group, then, that has licensed professionals, and you as a coach as part of that team of individuals trying to help these individuals with these diseases or illnesses, I mean, that's a different story, and that would be okay in most cases. But if you're out on your own, it's just you, and you want to, rid the world of this chronic condition, then it's really not what wellness is about. Wellness is about empowering people to optimize from a place of already pretty high functioning.
Yeah.
And so you're not there to fix a problem. You're there to push people to become a better version of themselves in some aspect, dimension of their life. It could be physical, it could be, emotional, but it's not the same as a healthcare provider who's trying to fix a problem.
And like maybe another practical consideration would be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but whether or not those services could be paid for by, flexible spending accounts, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts, they're all tax-based, tax-favored accounts. So the tax code is going to matter, right? I mean, they're based in the tax code, just like the definition of medical care that I was talking about is based in the tax code. And so if you're trying to use those kinds of dollars to pay for your services or have that, if it's medical services and you're not licensed to provide those services, then I think that expense is that you're not going to be able to use those dollars, because you have to justify it from the consumer standpoint. They have to justify that this expense qualifies as a
what about supplements? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk. There's a little delay. I didn't mean to talk over you. What about supplements?
Yeah, so my article talks about supplements too.
Okay.
Supplements are not regulated hardly at all.
Okay.
There's a Dietary Supplements Act, the SHEA, but it's pretty lenient. Really is about labeling, and the primary thing is that supplements are not drugs. So the FDA regulates drugs quite heavily, and any substance that is a drug has to go through a very rigorous testing process and approval process through the FDA before it can be sold and marketed as a drug. Supplements do not have to go through that, but in turn, for that ease of being able to get to market, they can't be promoted as drugs. And what are drugs? The FDA defines drugs very similar to how the IRS defines medical care. Drugs are substances that are used to treat, mitigate, prevent illness or disease. And so if you're using a supplement to treat, cure, prevent an illness or disease, it's not a supplement anymore. Even though it might say supplement on the label, if you as the practitioner are using it to treat some kind of condition, it is now a drug. And both the FTC and the FDA, and they have come after people who are using supplements really as drugs.
So yeah, and this is Donna. Hey Donna, welcome. Donna is a rock star. She is a registered dietitian and also a doctor of Oriental medicine. And and this is really what I was wanting to get underneath is so let's say a licensed practitioner recommended supplements to help, I mean, I don't know, in some cases treat. I know the verbiage there probably is, I don't know, a little bit, let's just say tenuous from my perspective. But really the core question I'm trying to get underneath is, if it's prescribed or recommended, let's just say
Mhm.
recommended by a licensed practitioner, can the patient or client cover that expense through
Yeah.
HSA or flex spending?
Yeah, and you'll see that in the publication 502 that even what we would consider wellness expenses like gym memberships and weight loss programs
Mhm.
or supplements, if the recommendation to join a gym or enroll in this diet program or take these supplements is coming from a licensed healthcare provider, that can then be deducted from your taxes because it's now become medical care because of the involvement and the recommendation of a licensed healthcare practitioner. Um, Whereas if it wasn't recommended by them and you were just doing it on your own, you couldn't deduct those expenses or use your HSA.
Ah, okay. Okay. All right, great. And then let's see. So Donnie has a couple of other really good questions. If a patient with kidney insufficiency and we increase clearance rate and the load on the kidney using diet, probiotic, and support, is that wellness or medical care? I think my understanding is it's medical because she is a licensed practitioner.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, you're treating kidney issues.
Right.
That's what I'm understanding
Yeah.
the question to be. You're treating kidney issues,
Hmm.
fixing a problem,
Yep.
a medical problem. And again, that's medical care under the definition, section 213D of the Internal Revenue Code. That's medical care. And so luckily you are a licensed professional and so as long as that's in your scope of practice under your state's licensing board uh, standards, then then that's fine.
Okay. And then this is an interesting question too. Can a healthcare practitioner include wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish they would, frankly. That's part of the problem. That's why we have so many people turning to wellness practitioners for resolving medical care issues because the medical system is not very responsive, or it's I have another article about that, the corporatization of healthcare and how it's become so business like and is steered so far away from its mission of really helping patients and acting in their best interest. It's really become more of a profit making enterprise, and that is the result of, and that results in very limited time that healthcare providers and these large health systems can have and spend with patients to talk about their well-being and other things that they can be doing. I mean, most of the time you go into the doctor's office, you tell them what's ailing you, they write a prescription, and you're done. I mean, that's the extent of so many doctor visits, and it's very unsatisfying, and it's not really meeting the real needs for
Mhm.
attention that so many patients are craving. And so wellness is sort of taking up that slack and
Yeah.
meeting those needs. And so back to the question, yeah, if providers, licensed healthcare providers had more time, they could certainly incorporate more wellness types of services into the visit. It's just that right now, the way our reimbursement and financial incentives work, there's no incentive to do it because they don't get paid for those services. It's all based on number of visits. Their income, their revenue is based on how many patients can we cram into this 12-hour period or whatever, and all the paperwork that has to be done for each of those patients because of all of the regulations and the administrative headaches. And so there's just no time for the wellness, but they certainly could. Absolutely.
So just want to clarify a quick question for any of our coaches who are non-licensed practitioners who may be on. So can you give us any tips on how do we market, right? You can't really say, hey, I specialize in celiac disease, right? That's a disease entity.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
I mean,
in
so it's a
general,
little bit
what do
more.
they do?
It's a little bit more nuanced. So I know plenty of coaches who are very knowledgeable about a certain condition. And if all you're doing is providing information about that condition,
Mhm.
just empowering, again, think of the word empower and have that sort of be your North Star. It's like, am I empowering people with information? Yeah, they could go look this up on their own,
Mhm.
but maybe they don't want to. Maybe you've done the hard work for them and curated the information that is important and kind of the most authoritative on this subject. And here you are, an expert in this subject, and you're just giving them the information. I mean, nothing's going to stop you legally from educating people. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, there's plenty of unlicensed people in medical schools teaching doctors because they're knowledgeable. They might have a PhD, but they're not, a practicing physician. It's just, but they're educating, and that's sort of your role. So it's just when you try to start fixing the problem,
Mm.
advising on, oh, here's what you should do to minimize, the symptoms of this. That's what an unlicensed person should not
Okay.
be doing. If it says it in the information that you're curating for them, fine. I mean, but if you're taking in and doing an assessment of this particular client, and then you're coming up with the plan of, okay, here's how we're going to
Mm.
fix your problem, that's going outside of what you should be doing as a
Okay.
unlicensed
Yeah,
professional.
yeah, that helps a lot. It's a very important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. Um, okay, so just kind of looking at yeah, some of the things that we've talked about so far. So you mentioned these articles. I love are those published? Are they like
They're in the process.
okay,
They'll
all
be
right.
coming out. I think all of them are going to end up coming out in 2025.
Okay. So
Um,
you'll keep us posted on that. Maybe after they come out, we can have you
yeah.
back on and we can get some. I'm sure people would be interested in getting their hands on those. I'm just curious, what would you like to see come from your work? What is your
Well,
dream?
yeah. I'd like to see more lawyers writing and practicing in this space. Um, I think there's a lot of things to tease out and explore. I don't want to be the only one. Well, I'm not. I know there's a few other lawyers in this space. I know. I've met some of them.
Mhm.
But I don't think there's enough. And certainly from the academic world, there aren't really any who are diving into these nuances in the wellness space. And so that's one. I'd also like to see some more standards for the wellness industry. And that's one of my other articles. It's No More Wild West, the need for professional standards in wellness.
Yeah.
And it's different from licensing. I don't want to see wellness professionals having to go through the licensing boards to do what they do. I also think the licensing has not caught up with technology, and it's very restrictive even for licensed professionals. They can't take advantage of like telehealth the way they should be able to. So I wouldn't advocate for license, but I would want some kind of standards that people who are unlicensed still have to be held to these expectations. And if they're not, that there's some repercussion for that. Because right now, there is no enforcement mechanism and no universal standard setting organization that is kind of being the watchdog for people who are wellness professionals and all of its iterations. So
Mm.
I'd like to see that. And yeah, I mean, I'd like to I'd like to see our healthcare system incorporate more wellness and basically move away from this corporatization phenomenon that is really basically a plague on our healthcare system. It doesn't serve the people it's meant to serve. It's way too costly, and definitely not getting the bang for the buck for the amount of money that the U.S. spends on healthcare. So that would be a dream, to actually see something that's more in line with what people want and what people can afford, and that's more equitable in its distribution in both access and also health. So that includes not just retooling the healthcare system itself, but looking at more upstream effect, influencers of health. So more investment, and this is for wellness and healthcare, more investment in the social determinants of health. So another thing I'd love to see in wellness and healthcare is more resources and attention paid to people's environments, social, economic, and physical environments, and how that influences your health and well-being. Right now, wellness is just too focused on lifestyle and behavior change, and that's not always possible for people who are in really impoverished, marginalized communities and situations. So we don't do enough in wellness to really pay attention to that. So I'd like to see my idea of wellness legal partnerships come to fruition and start really tackling some of those more social and structural drivers of health and well-being.
I love that. For our audience, anyone that wants to learn more about you, your services, where should we send them?
Yeah, I'd go to wellnesslaw.com.
Okay. Great. And do you take on, private practitioner clients? Okay.
Yep, I definitely do.
Okay. So wellnesslaw.com.
Yes.
Okay. And we didn't touch on this. I'll put that on the screen. Did I spell that right? Yes. We didn't touch on licensure at all, which is such a hot topic. Again, because many of the people in my audience are actually licensed, right? And they're big, oh my gosh, just so many questions about crossing state lines. Can I do it? Can I not do it? And honestly, so many differing thoughts out there and opinions on how to interpret things.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I said, I'm not a fan of the licensure infrastructure because it is so restrictive and doesn't take advantage of technology, which is what the people want. Again, there's so many aspects of healthcare and wellness, but mostly healthcare that don't address what the market is craving, and what patients need. And just frustrates me to no end. So, but licensure, if you are licensed, you need to pay attention to not only the state license laws for where you live as the profession, but also wherever your clients are located. So if you're seeing clients in other states where you don't have a license, you're technically violating, assuming you're practicing as the licensed professional, you're violating that state's law because you don't have a license. Now, there's interstate compacts that some professions have that have workarounds to having to get licensed in every state. Some are more friendly than others. The nursing compact, I think, is pretty friendly. But some are not so friendly. And anyway, you want to pay attention to both of those states, where your clients are located and where you're located.
Okay. Which is something that I think a lot of, just based on what I've observed, what I see is mostly people just looking at the state in which the client resides
Mm-hmm.
and kind of not looking at their own state. And
yeah, well, what's important to be mindful of your own state is more than likely, I mean, a lot of the licensing statutes are very similar, between the professions, and pretty much all of them will say, it's inappropriate and unprofessional conduct for you to violate the law relating to your profession. And if you're practicing, if you have clients in a state where you don't hold a license, you're technically violating the law related to your profession. And so you are now in violation of your own state's code of conduct, because it says in your own state's code of conduct that you shouldn't be violating the law related to your profession. And that can be subject to discipline. So yeah, I mean, you may be licensed in your state, but you're violating the law of another state. And it's very likely, I mean, obviously I haven't looked at every single profession in every single state, but I've seen enough of them where that's pretty routine to have language about not violating the law related to your profession. And if that includes practicing without a license in another state.
okay, so you could help a licensed practitioner navigate those questions.
Yeah. I mean, I do that.
Yeah.
frequently. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's a super common question, and it is just challenging. So, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart? Anything else that you'd like to share before we begin to wrap up?
I mean, I've said a lot. I'm happy to take questions. Reach out to me on my website if you have follow-up questions. I have tools and resources on my website as well that you might find helpful. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about this stuff all the time, because I don't think it's talked about enough. So again, I'm so thankful to you, Leslie, for making time and space for this discussion.
It's been great. All right. Well, greatly appreciate your time, Barbara. It was wonderful to reconnect with you. And thanks to everyone who joined us today, and great questions. Really appreciate that. Keep them coming. Visit Barbara at wellnesslaw.com. And just, are your podcasts listed on your website as well? So if
Yes, there's
folks
links.
okay. So those are easily findable as well. So you have two different podcasts.
Yeah, I don't know if both of them are linked to my Wellness Law, because I have a Lemon Spark podcast and a Wellness Law podcast. So certainly the Wellness Law podcast would be, you could find it through my website, but I don't know about the Lemon Spark one. That's a little different. So
Okay. Sounds good. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you again, Barbara. Really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your wisdom with my audience. And so thank you. And goodbye to all of you that joined, at least until next week. All right. So looking forward to seeing you next time. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.